My name is Owen Mercer. I was 36, a marine repair contractor in Newport, Rhode Island, and by that summer, I had built a life around fixing things that were easier to understand than people. Boats made sense. Engines had reasons. Salt corrosion had patterns. Bad wiring could be traced. A cracked fuel line did not tell you it was fine while quietly destroying itself. People did. That was why I lived alone above my workshop near the marina, drank coffee too late, worked too much, and told my sister I was taking a break from dating, even though the break had lasted 3 years and had started to look less like recovery and more like architecture. The night I saved Claire Beaumont, I was not supposed to be near the water. I was supposed to be home. I had finished a repair on a client's old sailboat, locked the shop, and was walking toward my truck when I heard shouting from the far end of the marina. Not laughter, not drunk noise. Shouting. There was a charity dinner happening that night at the yacht club. Black dresses, linen jackets, champagne. People who said summer house like it was a medical condition. I had avoided the whole thing because I liked my evenings without auction speeches and men asking if I could take a quick look at a boat problem for free. But the sound came again, sharper. Then someone yelled, "She's in the water!" I ran. By the time I reached the dock, people were gathered near the rail pointing into the dark harbor. Too many people, too much noise, not enough movement. A woman was in the water beyond the lights. I could barely see her at first, just a pale arm, dark hair, the flash of something silver at her wrist. She was trying to stay above the surface, but the current near that section of the marina could pull harder than it looked, especially after rain. I kicked off my shoes and went in. I don't remember deciding. I remember the cold hitting my chest so hard it stole the breath out of me. I remember someone yelling from the dock. I remember the taste of salt and diesel and panic. And I remember her eyes when I reached her. Gray, maybe blue. Wide. Terrified. But not only terrified, angry. That was what stayed with me later. Even half-submerged, fighting exhaustion, she looked furious that her body had betrayed her in front of all those people. "I've got you," I said. She tried to speak. Water hit her mouth. She coughed, grabbed my shirt, then loosened her grip immediately like she was ashamed of needing it. "Don't fight me," I said. "Just breathe." She stared at me like she hated the instruction but understood the necessity. By the time Harbor Patrol reached us, she was shaking badly. They got her onto the rescue platform, wrapped a blanket around her, and started asking questions. Name? Any pain? Did she hit her head? Could she remember what happened? She answered in short pieces. "Claire. No. I don't know. I slipped." The last one sounded wrong. Not because I knew anything, because she said it too quickly. A man in a tuxedo pushed through the crowd at the dock as they brought her up. "Claire." He was handsome in the polished, expensive way that made every expression look practiced. Dark hair, perfect collar, gold watch, face arranged into concern just a second too late. Claire saw him and went still. Not relieved. Still. That was the second thing I remembered later. The man crouched beside her. "My God, Claire, what happened?" She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "I'm fine, Graham." "You fell?" "I said I'm fine." His eyes flicked to me, not grateful, assessing, like I was an inconvenience standing too close to something he owned. "You pulled her out?" he asked. "Yeah." His smile appeared. "Thank you, truly. She's always been stubborn around water." Claire looked down. Something in me disliked him instantly. That was not fair. It also turned out to be correct. The paramedics arrived a few minutes later. Claire refused the stretcher at first, then accepted it after an older woman in pearls started crying and saying her name too many times. Graham walked beside her as they moved her, toward the ambulance, one hand hovering near her shoulder but never quite resting there. Before they loaded her in, Claire turned her head. Her eyes found mine through the lights, uniforms, and people pretending not to stare. For 1 second, the whole marina seemed to quiet around her. Then she mouthed 2 words. I didn't understand them. Or maybe I did and wished I hadn't. "Don't tell." Then the ambulance doors closed. I stood there soaked, shivering, and suddenly very aware that half the yacht club was looking at me like I had become part of the evening's entertainment. Graham came back before I could leave. He held out a hand. "Graham Ellison," I shook it because refusing would have made me look like the problem. Owen Mercer. Do you work here? Near here. His grip tightened slightly. If there's anything we can do to thank you, please let me know. Claire's family will be grateful. Claire's family, not Claire. I pulled my hand back. Just glad she's okay. Yes, he said. She will be. The way he said it made the words feel less like comfort and more like management. I went home wet, cold, and irritated with myself for caring. By midnight, I had showered, changed, and tried to convince myself the whole thing was over. People fell, people panicked. Rich men sounded like owners even when they meant well. Women mouthed strange things after almost drowning because shock made the mind unreliable. That was the reasonable explanation. I wanted to believe it. At 1:17 in the morning, someone knocked on my door. Not the downstairs shop entrance, my apartment door, 3 knocks. Soft. Then one more, weaker. I opened it expecting my sister or a neighbor or a marina security guard telling me I had left something unlocked. Claire Beaumont stood in the hallway, barefoot, hair still damp, a hospital bracelet around one wrist, wearing a black evening dress under a gray sweatshirt that was much too large for her and definitely not hers. Her makeup had mostly washed away. Her lips were pale. There was a small scrape near her collarbone, and a look in her eyes I recognized immediately from the water. Not fear only, fury. She held my wallet in one hand. I hadn't even realized I'd lost it. I found this in the ambulance blanket, she said. Her voice was hoarse. I stared at her. You should be at the hospital. I checked myself out. That's a terrible idea. I know. Do you need me to call someone? No. She looked down the hallway behind her, then back at me. That's why I came here. Something cold moved through me that had nothing to do with the harbor. Claire swallowed once. Then she said, Before they pulled me out, did I say anything to you? I remembered the ambulance doors, her eyes, the words I wasn't sure I had understood. Don't tell. I didn't answer fast enough. Claire saw it. Her face changed, and very quietly, like the truth was the last thing keeping her upright, she whispered, Then he heard me too. For a moment, I didn't move. Claire stood in my doorway at 1 in the morning, barefoot in a borrowed sweatshirt, still carrying herself like a woman trying not to collapse in front of a stranger. I looked past her into the hallway, empty. Then back at her. Come inside, I said. She hesitated. That told me more than if she had rushed in. Whatever had brought her here, fear had not made her careless. She was still measuring exits, distance, risk, still deciding whether I was safer than the place she had left. I'm not going to touch you, I said. I'm not going to call anyone unless you ask. But you're shaking, and my neighbor across the hall watches everything through her peephole like it's a civic duty. That got the smallest breath of a laugh from her. Not because it was funny, because she needed something normal to exist. Claire stepped inside. I closed the door, but not all the way. I left it cracked. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Thank you, she said. For the door? For not making me ask. I pointed toward the kitchen table. Sit down before you fall over. I'm not going to fall. You said that like a person who absolutely might. Her mouth tightened, but she sat. I got a blanket from the couch and set it on the chair beside her instead of wrapping it around her shoulders myself. Then I put water on the table and stepped back. She stared at the glass. Hospital bracelet, bare feet, expensive dress half hidden under a gray sweatshirt. A woman who looked like she belonged in a ballroom and had somehow ended up in my apartment above a boat repair shop. My wallet, I said quietly. She blinked, then looked down like she had forgotten it was in her hand. Oh! She slid it across the table. Thanks. It was under the blanket they put around me. I think you dropped it on the dock. Probably. I asked the ambulance driver whose it was. He said yours. Her eyes lifted. He also said you lived above the repair shop. I made a mental note never to underestimate Rhode Island's ability to turn into a village under pressure. You walked here from the hospital? Not all the way. I got a ride partway. With who? She looked away. That answer was enough. I sat across from her, leaving the table between us. Claire. She closed her eyes when I said her name. Not in pain exactly. More like she was tired of hearing it from people who wanted something. You asked if you said anything to me, I said. Her fingers tightened in the blanket. You mouthed something before they closed the ambulance doors. Her eyes opened. What? Don't tell. Her face lost what little color it had left. So, he did hear. Who? She looked at the door. Not dramatically, instinctively. Graham. The name sat there like a third person in the room. I kept my voice even. What wasn't I supposed to tell? Claire looked at me for a long time, and I could see the war happening behind her eyes. Trust the stranger who pulled her from the water. Trust no one. Say it and make it real. Stay silent and survive one more night. Finally, she said, I didn't slip. I didn't react fast. That mattered. If I looked shocked, she might retreat. If I looked like I had expected it, that would be worse. So I just waited. We were arguing, she said, Graham and I, on the side dock, away from the dinner. About what? Her laugh was thin and humorless. My life mostly. I said nothing. She looked down at the hospital bracelet. My father died 18 months ago. He left most of his voting shares in the Beaumont Harbor Trust to me. Graham has been helping my mother manage the foundation, the yacht club board, the charity events. All the things that sound harmless until you realize every dinner comes with paperwork. Graham is your fiancé? Was. That word mattered. Was. I ended it tonight, she said. There it was. Not loud, not theatrical. Just the sentence that had thrown her whole life into the water before her body followed. I told him I was done. No wedding. No shared advisory role. No signature on the revised trust authorization. He got very calm. I knew men like that. Calm in the way locked doors are calm. He grabbed my wrist, she continued. Not hard enough to leave a dramatic bruise. Just enough to stop me from walking away. Her voice started to thin. I pulled back. My heel slipped on the wet dock edge. He caught me for a second. She stopped. Her throat moved. For a second, she repeated. I felt my jaw tighten. She looked straight at me then. He'd let go. The apartment went very quiet. I could hear the rain ticking against the window over the sink. A boat horn far off in the harbor. The building settling under us like it wanted to pretend it hadn't heard. He let go, I said. He says I slipped. And did anyone see? No. Her smile was small and bitter. Conveniently. Claire. I'm not saying he pushed me. Her voice sharpened fast like she had been forced to clarify this too many times already inside her own head. That's what makes it worse. I don't even know what to call it. He had my wrist. I slipped. He could have held on. He didn't. I leaned back slowly, not away from her. Away from my own anger. And when you were in the water? I tried to say it. She swallowed. To the first man who reached over from the dock. I don't know who. I said he'd let go. Or I think I did. Then I saw Graham behind him, watching, listening. That was why she had mouthed it. Don't tell. Not because she wanted to protect Graham. Because she knew he had heard enough to understand she remembered. I checked myself out because he sent my mother to the hospital, she said. She was crying. He was being perfect. Everyone kept saying I was in shock. Her eyes filled, but she held the tears back with visible effort. Maybe I am, but I know what I felt. I know his hand opened. I believed her. I hated how quickly I believed her. Not because she seemed fragile, because she seemed furious at the exact kind of detail liars usually avoid. The hand opening. The second of choice. The horror of almost being saved by someone who decided not to. Do you have somewhere safe to go? I asked. She looked down. My mother's house is full of his people tonight. My friend Elise is out of town. I couldn't go to a hotel because he'll check. I shouldn't have come here. But you did. Yes. Why? She looked at my wallet on the table, then at me. Because you were the only person tonight who touched me like I was a person instead of a problem to manage. That sentence hit harder than I expected. I looked away first, only for a second. Then I stood. You can take the bedroom. No. Claire. I'm not taking your bed. I sleep on boats sometimes. My standards are damaged. I can't stay. You just said you don't have anywhere safe to go. I said I shouldn't have come here. And I'm saying you should stay until morning. Her eyes searched my face. What happens in the morning? First coffee, then we figure out who you trust. A friend, a lawyer, someone outside Graham's circle. She gave me a strange look. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but one step is better than standing barefoot in my kitchen at 1:30 pretending you're about to make a strategic exit. For the first time, her mouth almost smiled. Almost. Then someone knocked downstairs, not on my apartment door, on the workshop entrance below. 3 firm knocks. Claire went completely still. I turned toward the stairwell. Another knock. Then my phone lit up on the counter with a number I didn't recognize. A text appeared. Mr. Mercer, this is Graham Ellison. I believe Claire may have brought you something that belongs to me. Open the door. Claire read it over my shoulder. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. He knows I'm here. I looked at the text, then at Claire. She had gone so still it made the whole room feel dangerous. Not panicked, not frantic. Still. Like some part of her had learned that movement gave people something to grab. Another knock came from downstairs, harder this time. Claire, Graham called from below. How I know you're here? Her hand went to the hospital bracelet around her wrist. I stepped away from the kitchen window and picked up my phone. You don't have to answer him, I said. He'll make this ugly. It's already ugly. He just wants to control the lighting. That made her look at me, only for half a second, but enough. I opened the security camera app for the shop. The feed loaded slowly, then showed Graham standing under the yellow light outside my workshop entrance, still in his tuxedo shirt, bow tie undone, one hand on the doorframe like he owned the building. He looked calm. That was worse than if he had looked drunk or angry. Calm men at 1:30 in the morning are either lost or dangerous. Graham looked directly into the camera, then my phone buzzed again. Claire is confused and frightened. Open the door before this becomes a problem for you. Claire read it from where she stood behind me. Her face tightened. See? No, I said. I see a man making threats in writing. I took a screenshot, then another. She stared at my phone like the idea had not occurred to her. Don't delete anything, I said. I wasn't going to. I mean anything. Texts, calls, voicemails, anything from him, your mother, anyone who suddenly wants to know where you are. She swallowed once. You sound like you've done this before. I've repaired boats for divorcing couples. I looked back at the camera feed. People are very creative when they think property is involved. That was when something crossed her face. Property. Not fear this time. Recognition. What? I asked. She looked toward the gray sweatshirt she was wearing, then down at herself like she had forgotten the dress underneath. I signed nothing tonight, she said. Okay, no, you don't understand. Her voice sharpened, coming alive with the first clear thread of strategy I had seen in her. The revised trust authorization. He wanted my signature before the charity board meeting tomorrow. I refused. Then we argued on the dock. And he told my mother I was overwhelmed, emotional, unstable since my father died. She looked at the workshop camera feed. If he makes tonight look like I had some kind of breakdown, he gets the signature delayed, or challenged, or routed through my mother's advisory vote while I'm being protected. There it was. Not just a bad fiancé with paperwork. Graham knocked again. Claire, he called, voice controlled but louder now. This is embarrassing. Come downstairs. The word hit her. Embarrassing. I saw it land exactly where he meant it to, so I said, no. She looked at me. What? You're not going downstairs to prove you're not embarrassing. He'll wake the neighbors. My neighbors have survived boat engines at 6 in the morning. They'll adapt. I pressed record on the security feed, then I opened the window above the alley just enough for my voice to carry down. Graham, I called. He looked up immediately. His expression changed when he saw me, not much. Just enough to show me that his calm had been a costume. This is private, he said. You're standing outside my closed business after midnight. It's less private than you think. I'm here for Claire. She doesn't want to speak to you. A pause. Then he smiled. A terrible, polished thing. Mr. Mercer, you pulled her from the water. I appreciate that. But you don't know her. She's had a shock. She says things when she's upset. Behind me, Claire inhaled sharply. I kept my eyes on Graham. Then you can leave and call her tomorrow through her attorney. His smile thinned. There is no attorney. Sounds like something to confirm tomorrow. For the first time, the mask slipped. Only a crack. You have no idea what you're involving yourself in. I held the phone higher, letting him see I was recording. I'm starting to. He looked at the phone, then up at me. Then, very quietly, he said, Tell Claire that disappearing with a dock mechanic after a public incident won't help her case. I heard Claire move behind me. Before I could stop her, she stepped beside the window. Not fully in view. Enough for her voice to reach him. I didn't disappear, she said. Graham's face changed. Claire. She held the windowsill with one hand. Her voice shook, but it did not break. I left because you heard me say it. He went still. I felt the room shift. Graham looked toward the alley, then back up. You're confused. No, she said. I was confused in the water. I was scared in the ambulance. I was quiet at the hospital. I'm not confused now. The silence after that was sharp enough to cut. Then Graham said, Open the door. No, she answered. One word. Small, huge. Graham stared up at her. For a second, I thought he might try the door again. Instead, he stepped back, pulled out his phone, and said, You're making a mistake. Claire's grip tightened on the sill. I said, So are you. He looked at me. I kept recording. A light came on across the alley, then another. My neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, opened her second-floor window and leaned out wearing a robe and the expression of a woman who had waited her whole life to participate in a situation. Owen, she called. Do you need me to call the police? Graham looked up at her, then at the camera over the shop door, then at me. The calculation happened visibly. He put his phone away. This isn't over, he said. No, Claire said almost too softly for him to hear. It isn't. Graham walked back toward the street. I kept the camera recording until he turned the corner. Then I closed the window. Claire stood there for 1 second. 2. Then her knees gave a little. I caught the chair, not her, pushing it closer so she could sit without making it feel like a collapse. She sat. Then she covered her face. Not crying loudly, just breathing through whatever it had cost her to say no. I saved the video file 3 different ways before I said anything. Phone, cloud, email. When I looked back, Claire was watching me. You believed me before you had proof, she said. I had proof. What proof? You came here barefoot after checking yourself out of a hospital, and the man you were afraid of showed up at my door calling you confused before asking a single question about whether you were okay. Her face changed, like she had been waiting all night for the obvious thing to sound obvious to someone else. Then my phone buzzed again. Not Graham this time. Unknown number. A voicemail arrived. Claire stared at it. I played it on speaker only after she nodded. A woman's trembling voice filled my kitchen. Claire, sweetheart, Graham says you're with the man from the marina. Please come home. The board is already asking questions. We can fix this quietly if you just stop making it worse. Claire closed her eyes. That's my mother. The word quietly hung there, heavy, familiar. I stopped the voicemail. Claire opened her eyes and the fury was back. Not frantic. Focused. He's already moving, she said. Then we move first. She looked at me. How? You said your friend Elise is out of town. Does she answer at 2 in the morning? If it matters. It matters? Claire picked up her phone with both hands. This time, they weren't shaking. Not much. She called Elise. And while the phone rang, while the harbor wind rattled the window, and the saved video sat like evidence on my screen, Claire looked at me and whispered, I need you to hear this too. So I can't let them tell me later I imagined it. Elise answered on the 4th ring. Not sleepy. Alert. That told me Claire had chosen well. Claire? A woman's voice said. Where are you? Claire put the phone on speaker and set it on the table between us. I'm safe, she said. A pause. With Graham? No. Another pause. This one was sharper. Good, Elise said. Claire closed her eyes for half a second. That single word did more than comfort her. It confirmed something she had probably been afraid to know. You believe me? Claire asked. I believed you before you called, Elise said. Your mother texted me saying you were not yourself, and Graham was handling the situation. That's never how good men describe frightened women. Claire looked at me. I stayed quiet. Elise continued. Where are you? Claire glanced at me once before answering. With Owen Mercer, the man from the marina. Did he hurt you? No. Did he pressure you? No. Do you want him in the room while we talk? Claire looked directly at me. Yes, she said. That word landed differently than it had any right to. Elise exhaled. Okay, then here's what we do. You do not go to your mother's house. You do not call Graham. You do not sign anything. You take photos of your wrist, your scrape, the hospital bracelet, your dress, your shoes, everything. Owen, are you recording this? I can, I said. Do it. I started an audio recording on my phone and placed it beside Claire's. Elise's voice changed, becoming colder and more precise. Claire, say only what you know. Not what you fear, not what you think people will believe. What you know. Claire's face went pale again, but this time she did not look away. I know I ended the engagement on the dock, she said. I know Graham grabbed my wrist when I tried to leave. I know I slipped. I know for 1 second he had me, I felt his hand on my wrist. Her voice cracked, then steadied. And I know he let go. The kitchen went silent. I had heard the story already. Hearing her state it like evidence made it worse. Elise spoke softly now. Good, that's enough for tonight? No, Claire said. I looked at her. So did the phone somehow. Claire sat straighter. It's not enough. The board meeting is at 9. If Graham gets there first, he'll make this about my mental state. He probably already has, Elise said. I'm booking the first flight home. You won't make it. No, but my firm's Boston partner can. I'm calling her next. Claire looked exhausted, but something fierce had returned to her eyes. I want to go to the board meeting. No, Elise said immediately. Elise, no, not alone. Not unprepared. Not barefoot from a hospital. Claire almost smiled at that. Almost. Then she looked at me. Owen has the video. Elise went quiet. What video? I explained. Graham at the shop, the texts, the threats, Claire refusing to come down, my neighbor offering to call the police, Graham leaving only after he saw the camera. When I finished, Elise said, Save it in 3 places. Already did. Good, I like you. Claire looked at me for one brief second. For some reason, that mattered more than it should have. By 3 in the morning, my apartment had turned into the least glamorous crisis office in Rhode Island. Claire changed into my cleanest sweatshirt and a pair of drawstring pants I had never seen look that expensive. She photographed the red mark on her wrist under the kitchen light. I brewed coffee neither of us finished. Elise texted contact information for a lawyer named Diana Marsh, who called at 4:10 with the voice of a woman who had already decided sleep was optional when evidence was available. At 6:30, Diana arrived. She was small, gray-haired, and terrifying in flat shoes. She listened to Claire without interrupting, reviewed the texts, watched the video twice, asked questions that made no room for drama. Then she said, We are not proving attempted murder this morning. Claire flinched. Diana held up one hand. We are proving coercion, unsafe contact, and a conflict of interest around trust paperwork. That is enough to stop a board vote today. Criminal questions come after medical documentation and a formal statement. I respected her immediately. She looked at me. You're the witness? I guess. You guess in social situations, not in affidavits. Yes, I said. I'm the witness. Better. Claire's mouth twitched. At 8:50, we walked into the Beaumont Harbor Trust boardroom. Not through the back, through the front. Claire wore my sweatshirt under her coat, hospital bracelet still on her wrist, hair tied back, face pale but upright. Diana walked on one side. I walked half a step behind because this was not my entrance to Own. The boardroom went silent. Graham was already there. Of course he was. So was Claire's mother, eyes swollen, hands clasped around a tissue. 4 board members sat around the long table with folders open in front of them. Graham stood when he saw her. Claire, he said gently, like the room was his stage and concern was his costume. Thank God. Claire stopped at the end of the table. No, she said, one word. The same one from my window. The room shifted. Diana stepped forward. No vote will be held on the revised trust authorization today. Ms. Beaumont is documenting coercive conduct connected to the proposed signature and unsafe contact after a medical incident last night. You'll all receive formal notice within the hour. Graham's face remained calm. Almost. This is absurd, he said. Claire is traumatized. She needs rest, not legal theater. Claire looked at him then. You came to Owen's shop at 1:30 in the morning. His eyes flicked to me. Mistake. Everyone saw it. Diana placed printed screenshots on the table. He also sent these messages. Graham's mother-of-pearl cufflink caught the light as his hand tightened. Claire's mother whispered, Graham? He turned toward her. Margaret, she's confused. Claire took one step closer to the table. I am tired, she said. I am hurt. I am scared. But I am not confused. No one spoke. She removed the hospital bracelet from her wrist and set it on the table beside the screenshots. You all wanted me to sign papers today because Graham said I wasn't handling things well. Her voice shook but did not fail. I will not sign anything under pressure. I will not be represented by the man whose interests depend on calling me unstable, and I will not be managed quietly because the truth is inconvenient. Graham's mask cracked. You're making a spectacle of yourself. Claire looked at him, then at the board. No, she said. He is. That was when Diana played the video, not all of it, just enough. Graham outside my shop, the threat, the line about disappearing with a dock mechanic, his voice saying, You're making a mistake. The boardroom air changed completely. Graham was no longer a concerned fiancé. He was a man caught speaking when he thought the room was smaller. Claire's mother started crying, but this time, she wasn't looking at Claire like a problem. She was looking at Graham. He knew it. Diana closed her tablet. Mr. Ellison should leave the room before this proceeds. For 1 second, Graham looked like he might refuse. Then 2 board members stood, quietly. That was enough. He gathered his folder, looked at Claire with a hatred so clean it made my skin tighten, and walked out. Only when the door closed did Claire sway. I stepped forward but stopped before touching her. She looked back at me. Then she reached for my hand herself. Not for the board. Not for the room. For balance. And when her fingers closed around mine, I understood that saving her from the water had been the easy part. The hard part was helping her stay above everything that came after. The board meeting did not become a miracle. That would make it too neat. It became paperwork, statements, pauses, legal language. People asking careful questions because careful questions protected them from admitting what they had almost allowed. But the vote was suspended. That was the first real thing. The revised trust authorization was pulled from the agenda. Graham's advisory access was frozen pending review. Diana arranged for Claire to give a formal statement later that afternoon, and one of the board members quietly asked security to remove Graham's building credentials before anyone changed their mind. Claire sat through all of it with my sweatshirt under her coat, her hospital bracelet on the table, and her hand around a paper cup of water she never drank. Her mother sat beside her, not touching her at first. Then, halfway through Diana explaining the temporary protective measures, Margaret Beaumont reached across the space between them and covered Claire's hand with hers. Claire froze. Her mother whispered, I'm sorry. Claire closed her eyes. It was not enough. Of course it wasn't. But it was a start. By noon, the board had issued a formal pause on all trust changes. By 3, Graham had been removed from every committee connected to the Beaumont Harbor Trust. By 5, his attorney had sent a statement calling the whole thing a misunderstanding. Diana read it, laughed once without humor, and said, Good. Men who panic in legal language are still panicking. That was the first time Claire smiled that day, a real one, small, exhausted, but real. The police report came next, then medical documentation, then more questions. Claire did not try to make the story bigger than what she knew. She never said he pushed her. She said what she had said in my kitchen. He held her wrist. She slipped. He could have held on. He let go. That was enough for people who knew how to listen. It took months for the civil consequences to settle. Graham avoided criminal charges more serious than harassment and intimidation, mostly because the dock had no camera and the moment itself had no witness. Claire hated that at first. Then Diana told her, closure is not the same as maximum punishment. Closure is when he no longer has access. So that became the goal. Access ended. Graham was removed from the trust, from the yacht club board, from every quiet room where he had once used concern as a key. The engagement was formally dissolved. The revised trust document was voided. Claire kept full voting authority over her father's shares. Most importantly, every future trust action required independent counsel present. No private signatures, no family friend advisors, no quiet management. The door closed, not perfectly, but firmly enough. For a while, Claire stayed at her mother's house. Then she didn't. She moved into a small rented cottage near the harbor, close enough to smell salt when the wind shifted, far enough from the yacht club that nobody could mistake her healing for an invitation to comment. I saw her again 2 weeks after the board meeting. Not because she came to my door, because I found a note taped to the workshop entrance. Your sweatshirt survived. Your coffee did not. See, inside the bag was my gray sweatshirt, washed and folded with the kind of precision that made it look more expensive than anything I owned. There was also a small box. Lemon scones. I took one bite and understood immediately that rich people had been wasting money on the wrong charity events. Claire came by the next afternoon. This time wearing jeans, a white sweater, and shoes. That detail mattered. She stood in my shop doorway looking at the half-repaired engine on the stand. You really do fix boats, she said. I maintain the illusion professionally. She walked closer, careful not to touch anything greasy. I wanted to say thank you without legal witnesses. You already said thank you. No. Her eyes found mine. I thanked you for pulling me out of the water. I didn't thank you for believing me when I had no clean proof. I set down the wrench. You had enough. For you. Yes. She looked away. For a second I thought she might cry. Instead, she looked back and said, Would you walk with me? So, we walked. Along the marina in daylight this time. No black water, no shouting, no tuxedos. Just boats knocking gently against their lines and gulls screaming like unpaid critics. We did not fall in love quickly. That matters. I did not become her rescuer. She would have hated that. I would have hated myself eventually. For months, we were careful. Coffee after legal appointments, walks after therapy sessions, repairs on her late father's old sailboat, which she insisted she wanted to learn herself. The first time she stepped onto a dock again, her hands shook so hard she cursed at them. I stood beside her and said nothing. She looked at me and said, You're being very quiet. You told me once that people manage you when they're afraid. Her mouth softened. Then she took one more step. That was how Claire came back to herself. One step at a time. A year later, the Beaumont Harbor Trust launched a small maritime apprenticeship program for local kids who couldn't afford sailing lessons or trade training. Claire built it herself, not as charity decoration, as something useful. She asked me to help design the workshop portion. I said yes before she finished the question. Too fast, she said. I've been accused of worse. You're allowed. That was the first time she kissed me. In my workshop, beside an engine block, with grease on my sleeve and sunlight cutting across the floor. Not dramatic, not like the end of fear, like the beginning of something that no longer had to be about fear. 3 years later, we bought the old sailboat from her father's estate. Technically, Claire bought it. Practically, I spent every weekend arguing with the electrical system until it surrendered. We renamed it Second Current. She said the name was too obvious. I said, obvious things are underrated when you almost drown. She let me win that one. 5 years after the night I pulled her from the harbor, Claire stood on the dock in a blue dress, hair loose in the wind, and married me beside the water she had once believed would only remember her terror. Her mother cried. Diana officiated because apparently terrifying lawyers can become sentimental if given enough warning. Elise gave a toast that included the sentence, Claire has always had excellent judgment, except for the first fiancé and possibly this boat mechanic. I accepted the criticism. Years later, people still asked how we met. Claire usually said, he returned my life to me. I always corrected her. No, I'd say. You came back for it. Because that was the truth. I pulled her from the water, but Claire Beaumont saved herself from everything after. I was just lucky enough to be the door she knocked on when she decided she wanted witnesses to the truth. What would you have done if a woman you saved from drowning showed up at your door in the middle of the night, terrified that someone powerful was already rewriting what happened? And have you ever had to fight not just for safety, but for the right to be believed? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like.